Conflict is something that's inherent to our lives. Conflict isn't something necessarily that we seek, but it is something that's naturally present. I'm sure you've all heard that without conflict, there is no progress. Most sane people don't seek physical confrontation. But when that happens, often unpreparedly, the idea of self-defense is a topic that we start to talk about. It's my business in a certain capacity to study self-defense, and I'd like to share some of those points with you today, specifically with regard to how your posture incorporates itself into self-defense. And I'm going to talk to you about three things in particular. I'm going to talk to you about our stance in self-defense. I'm going to talk to you about something called the Continuum of Force and how your posture plays into that. And then I'd like to give you a quick demonstration that ties those two aspects together. So, starting with the stance, may I have a volunteer, please, from the audience? No? Thank you. Now, if you wouldn't mind standing right here facing me. Now, normally when we face each other and talk to each other in any type of situation, it's just like Nell and I are standing right here. We stand facing each other online to address each other, to talk and to communicate. But in a self-defense scenario, that's not necessarily conducive to protecting yourself. And I'd like to demonstrate that by means of the magic finger, which is effervescent with neutrinos and is able to push her off balance very quickly. Now, the reason being is because she is facing me, and all her balance is essentially on her heels and toes, so it's easy for me to off-balance her very quickly that way. Would you take one half step back with your right foot, then? Or your left foot? How about your left foot? Thank you. Now, notice that her whole body alignment has really changed. Her alignment previously was more or less towards this, straight towards me. But now her shoulder alignment, or her center of gravity, has changed laterally or obliquely to me. The magic finger is defeated because of how her balance has changed. Thank you, now. It's very important to address our stance when we're talking about a self-defense posture. We don't want to simply be pushed over. We want to be able to have mobility either to the left, forward in an aggressive stance, or to retreat away from that situation. I want you to keep the idea of your stance in mind as we transition to something called the Continuum of Force. Continuum is a lofty word, and I wonder if someone could put the word continuum into base word, small word definitions that maybe we could all grasp a hold of. Does anyone know what continuum means? I'd like to share that.
Progression?
A progression. Thank you, Sharon. A progression is very good. I like that definition. It is, in fact, a progression of events, as you see here, whose discrete events, side by side, aren't really that dissimilar. But on the opposite ends of the spectrum, they are markedly different. Now, a continuum of force can range, as we see here, from a calm situation to a conflicting situation or a violent situation. And in between there's a kind of uncertain, kind of a gray area. Now, our posture needs to be prepared for that. In a known conflict situation, we must have that good base that we talked about, but also protect our vital areas with our hands. But in the same way, if we go into an uncertain situation or a calm situation with that type of aggressive posture, we're escalating that situation. We are changing the energy of the environment. So it's important to realize how that plays into it. In that uncertain area, what happens? You've seen law enforcement personnel often interview people with their hands right here in front of them. This is something called the interview stance. It's an uncertain situation on that other participant in this environment. They're able to transition very quickly to a situation where they can defend themselves. So that's the idea of how posture plays into this force continuum. And to give you an example, I'd like to ask for another volunteer, please. Art? Sure. Art, would you stand facing me again? Hold this weapon. I'd like you to hold that weapon. I'd like you to hold that weapon very tightly. I'm pointing at my head as if we were intent to shoot. You can put it in either hand you like. Okay. In this type of situation, there's a lot of adrenaline on both sides of this object. The last thing that needs to happen if someone is getting ready to employ this weapon at you is any jerky movements, because he holds his life in your hand. In this case, posture is very important, a very submissive posture. Please don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I have a wife. I have kids. Please don't kill me. But really, what we've done is change the situation to our advantage by that dismissive posture. And now there are a series of moves which we're able to then take advantage of it. Thank you. Outside there was a posture of aggression, or excuse me, outside there was a posture of submissiveness, inside a posture of aggression. Most of what we communicate is done by our posture, and it's important to regulate the scenario based upon it. And I've talked to you about three things today. I've talked to you about our stance, basically how it applies to self-defense, how our posture can influence the continuum of force, and how posture is used to gain an advantage in the self-defense scenario. I hope it's been enlightening, but remember, as uncomfortable as it is about talking, or about talking in a scenario of self-defense, it's even more uncomfortable if you haven't done so when you're actually faced with it. Thank you.